Once again, welcome to all of you who have managed to attend the webinar. And just for your information, the webinar is going to be recorded. Yeah, that's so that people who unfortunately are unable to join us at this time are able to see it. The slides will all be published on the Regia website within the next 24 hours or so. And the recording of the webinar maybe just a little bit longer than that, but should be up in time for the weekend for folks who haven't been able to dial in. This is the third in the webinar series for the Regia Marine Seismic Survey. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about progress on our environmental assessments. And we're also going to be giving an update on our consultation process and our work on the activity design. So for those of you that are unaware, the Regia Marine Seismic Survey is a seismic survey proposed to explore and map the subsurface of the ocean floor in the pink area that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. That area is called our activity planning area. It's quite a large area at the moment, and we're working with the community and also with our environmental assessment team to refine that area, and so that all of that area won't be surveyed. It will be a smaller proportion of that survey, a smaller proportion of that area rather. And yeah, we've received a lot of great feedback from the community so far about the values and sensitivities in that region. The draft predictions of our environmental impacts and risks will be published soon. We acknowledge that they're probably about 3 weeks behind schedule, and so I'll come on to what we're going to do about that in just a moment. But those documents should be up online again, as I say, by the end of this week. Consultation started in February, and up until now, that consultation has been open until the 30th of June. And I'll explain that consultation process and how it's varying with the feedback that we're receiving. The final details about the activity are that the earliest start of the activity is the 1st of November 2023, with the latest finish of 31st of October 2028. That's a 5-year window. The survey duration, though, will be 90 days of the vessel out in the ocean and 60 days worth of acquisition. So that's the proposed activity. And for those of you that have seen the previous webinars, and as a refresher for those of you that haven't been to these webinars, we have a very defined environmental assessment process that we have to follow. It's defined by our regulations. We get to add some nuance to help the consultation process. And so what we've done to date is published a series of documents to help people understand what we do, how we do it, what the activity is, and what we're proposing, and how we're proposing to manage environmental impacts and risks. We have published the preliminary environmental impact and risk assessment, that's up online at the moment. We have published our draft decision-making criteria. We've published our legislative requirements analysis, and we've published our implementation strategy. These are all component parts of the process that you can see in the diagram on the slide. We will shortly publish the interaction with other marine users assessment. We will shortly publish the sound propagation assessment, or at least a summary of that assessment, and the modelling, which we're still working through the details of. Eventually that will be published as well. And all of these will be published, as I mentioned earlier, with our predictions of impacts and risks, which should be by the end of this week. Within our environmental assessment, we have just started commencing work on our oil pollution emergency plan, our operational and scientific monitoring plan in the event of the unexpected release of diesel, and yeah, finishing the impact and risk assessment treatment, so working out how we control the impacts and risks that we've predicted. This slide is actually from the last webinar, but I wanted to flash it up again because it may be something that people have missed on our website at the moment. We have a particular engagement tool that is looking for feedback on our decision-making criteria. These have been published for approximately a month or so now. The decision-making criteria relate to how we define what an acceptable level of impact and risk would be. And so we've done our preliminary work of the sensitivities in the area, and we've come up with some categories that you can see in the table. And obviously, I won't read these out, but there's some categories there about what a defined acceptable level of impact and risk would be. And then we've put some statements alongside those to help guide people as to how we're thinking about what would be acceptable in the circumstances that we find ourselves in relation to how we manage impacts and risks. So if you haven't done already, I'd really encourage you to contribute through the website to the discussion board on our decision-making criteria. The full document's only 5 or 6 pages that gives context on the table that you can see as a summary there. So we have been able to make some progress in the last month on our activity design. There are 4 activity limitations that I'm really pleased to say that we've got in place. And 2 of those are mapped here, and the full mapping details will be uploaded to the website as soon as we can. The first activity limitation is that we are going to exclude surveying in May to October. And that's primarily to avoid the southern right whale presence in the calving area. That's not on the map at the moment, but essentially it's in those bays around Portland and Warrnambool along the coast, extending out probably about 15 to 20 kilometres. We'll map this all on our interactive site soon. The second activity limitation is that we will be putting a 10.3 kilometre exclusion zone around Dean Mar, or Lady Percy Julia Island, and that's primarily in place due to the feedback and the research, the feedback we received and the research we've been able to do on the island. That means we believe that we need to put the exclusion zone in place to protect sea lions, birds, and some other species on the island, and that's mapped on the diagram that you can see. Which is up in the sort of bluey green circle. Another exclusion zone that we've put in place as a result of feedback from abalone divers who dive down to 30 metres. We've been able to extend the water depth exclusion down to 40 metres. This is going to avoid impacts to the species that are found in those areas. And obviously to commercial fishers in that zone, and the 40 metre contour is represented by the blue line on the image there on the right hand side. It's not mapped here, but we've also excluded vessel movements between Dean Mar and the mainland. A couple of reasons for this. We've been able to do some desktop research that says that there are spiritual values from traditional owners in the movement of spiritual values from the mainland into or onto Dean Mar, and so avoiding that channel between Dean Mar and the mainland seems sensible. We also had some feedback from commercial fishers to avoid that channel as well, so it's a commitment that we're prepared to make. This has resulted, or these activity limitations have resulted in one minor change to the activity. And the activity planning area. At the moment, we're working exactly on what this number will be, the 10 kilometres, but just to this western side, this boundary here. So I don't know whether you can see my cursor or not, but the perpendicular line sort of from the coast there around 10 kilometres out. So we're just having to make some tweaks and adjustments to our activity planning area just to facilitate these exclusion zones. These exclusion zones are for active source, so there'll be no active source in these areas. There may well be vessel movements, which we'll try to minimise, of course, but there'll be no active source in these areas. So the consultation process, not a great deal of change so far in terms of what the process is, but there's one significant change is that we've heard from a number of people that they feel like they'd like more time to understand our activity, understand what we're doing, and to go through the consultation process with us. That coupled with the fact we have only just been able to make contact with some of the traditional owners and some of the fishing groups. Also, we recognise we're a couple of weeks behind with our environmental assessment information being published. So all things considered, we believe it's appropriate to extend the consultation process from a 5-month process to a 6-month process. And so you can see the edits to that timing on the slide here. So we now have an additional month where we're doing the environmental assessments, and we're really grateful to everybody who's provided comment on the website and directly to us through the website and our email addresses. And obviously that will have a knock-on effect on the mitigation and management information we publish, which will now be in June. And so the objections and claims process now is in July rather than June. So all in all, trying to give additional time for people to be able to make the comments and to engage in the process with us that we've previously defined. This week, NOPSEMA published some new guidance for relevant persons. And as a reminder, a relevant person is anyone with functions, activities or interests in the environmental planning area, and you may be a relevant person. So if you feel like you're affected and you've got a specific interest, and NOPSEMA guidance now explains what that could be. It could include things like cultural and spiritual connections to the sea, or interests in protection of specific marine species. NOPSEMA also clarified that the interests of a relevant person should clearly be more than a general interest in the environment or offshore petroleum activities. And the reason for this is that relevant persons will experience a better consultation process with us if they can be specific about how they may be affected and what their functions, interests and activities are. Also, the guidance specifies that community members may choose not to engage. It's entirely your right not to. And there are consultation processes through public comment, which this environment plan will be exposed to, or directly to NOPSEMA if you so wish. The link there in the slide there will be up on the slides, and so you'll be able to download this document. I'd really encourage anybody who's unsure whether you're a relevant person or is a relevant person and is already in the process with us to read this new guidance, as I say, that was released this week. So what have we done to date? So far, consultation has taken up a huge amount of our time, quite rightly so, between February and May. I won't list all of those things, but just some highlights. We've undertaken a number of radio interviews, which have been great to get our story out into the community and raise awareness. And we've undertaken now 6 community sessions with over 100 attendees and nearly 60 attendees in Port Fairy just a couple of weeks ago, which was a great event. And we learned an extraordinary amount from the community that we'll be able to feed into our environmental assessments. So thank you to everyone that has engaged with us so far. It's been much appreciated. Actually, at this point, it's also worth noting we will be doing another interview live on the ABC tomorrow morning. So please do dial into the ABC for that. And we'll be back out in the community. In fact, I think this might even be my next slide. Yes, we'll be back out in the community doing more information sessions, updating the community on what we've done, and hopefully meeting some new people. We're jointly hosting some sessions with ConocoPhillips this next week on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday in Warrnambool, Port Fairy and Portland respectively. And then subsequently we have heard from people that some people would like a seismic specific information session to be held. So we're going to do those as well. We currently have 2 scheduled, one in Apollo Bay and one in Port Fairy later in June. All of the dates and details are on the website. There may well be subsequent Regia only sessions, depending on the feedback that we receive from folks over the next week or so. So we're going to continue to advertise what we're doing. We'll keep people updated with how things are changing. Tune into our social media channels for those updates. But the primary focus for us over the next couple of months really is the one-on-one consultation process with relevant persons, and that's the process that's mandated by the regulations. All the stuff that we do with the community is I would call it, it's good practice. It's not necessarily required by the regulations, but I believe it helps us. Yeah, so we'll be focusing now on the one-on-one consultation processes with everybody that we've been able to identify so far. With our environmental assessments, what we're hoping to have over the next couple of months is to receive comments on our draft impact and risk assessments, comments on our modelling reports. We will have a couple of impact assessments that are underway, so our interactions with marine users and our assessment of sound in the marine environment will be a little bit delayed, but we'll get those out and publish those as soon as we can. We will be also doing a piece of work where we're evaluating all of the impacts and risks collectively, and over the next couple of months we'll also be turning our mind to the cumulative impact assessment, which is a requirement under the regulations. And then I mentioned the risk treatment piece, so we'll be looking at further control measures and activity limitations that we can put in place to reduce impacts and risks. In terms of the activity design, what happens next is that we'll have an acquisition area, an active source area, and an operational area. And as soon as they're ready, we'll publish those. And we are looking at further exclusion zones, looking at certain distances from coastlines. We're looking at the 12 Apostles State Marine Park, the Marine Sanctuary, and we've also had some feedback about activity from fishing charters and such, and fishing activity in the greater than 400-metre water depth contour. So we're looking at some exclusion zones there, and as soon as they become firm commitments that we're comfortable that we can make, those will be communicated through the various channels as well. We've now got time for a Q&A function, so I'll stop sharing. The Q&A function can be found at the top of your screen, hopefully. And yes, now's the time to, we've got plenty of time. I've rushed through the slides a touch, so there may well be questions, but I'm more than happy to take any questions through that Q&A function. It seems to have worked the last couple of times we've done this, but yeah, now feel free to pop through those questions through that function. While people might be typing in some questions, if you see a question that you like, you should be able to upvote that question. So just in case we get lots of questions, I'll prioritise those ones that have been upvoted. I wonder, Ben, thank you. I was just wondering if the Q&A function wasn't working. So what have you said here? Right, so parliamentary inquiry recommends that proponents consider and adopt low impact technologies in activity proposals. How are you doing this? Yeah, so there's a few different low impact technologies. So we consider this various different parts of the activity. First and foremost, we look at whether or not there are different source sizes or different source designs or different source methods of creating the signal that we need to be able to receive the geological information in return. One of those is marine vibrosis. So there'll be a consideration in REP of marine vibrosis. We also have to look at technologies that lower impacts and risks, such as people might have come across some literature that looks at bubble curtains, which are sort of curtains of air that you put into the environment, that if they function properly, they can there's some propagation losses that can happen. Those technologies typically have fairly considerable impacts of their own, so we're going to weigh those things up as well. And then there are the technologies in terms of the control measures that we put in place. So the control measures that in some way limit our impacts and risks more than what we would normally do. And that's part of the as low as reasonably practicable assessment that we do. We also are looking at I think the full parliamentary inquiry also requires us to look at all new technologies, not just the ones that lower impact, but ones that help us understand our environmental impacts a little bit better as well. So we're also looking at ways of monitoring our received levels in the environment. We're looking at passive acoustic monitoring on buoys prior to the survey being present, and we're also looking at putting those buoys in place if we can during the survey. So there's a few different bits and pieces that we're looking at, see if we can make them work in this situation. Examples of control measures. So, well, the one that I'll just carry on from where I was. So one control measure would be that we'd put passive acoustic monitoring on the vessel. That would complement our marine fauna observers that would be on the vessel looking out for, the marine, mainly whales, but all marine fauna. And then we're thinking about putting passive acoustic monitoring on tethered buoys outside of the area, so that we've got another piece of information that we can use to help protect whales. So a control measure is any system, procedure, item of equipment, or person that we put into our environment plan that helps us make sure that our predictions of impacts and risks are what they would be, and they limit or control that level of impact. And the idea is, if you were to remove the control measure, you would see an increased level of impact. The full set of control measures and performance standards will be published well in advance of our environment plan being submitted. Yeah, there's hundreds of them that you'll see in that process. I see we have a hand up, Freya, and unfortunately, the best way. Oh, there's another. Okay, there's another question from Ben. And Freya, just while I answer that question, with your hand up, I don't think I can do anything with that. Unfortunately, I need you to put a question into the Q&A if at all possible. If that doesn't work, there might be one workaround where I can turn your microphone on, but I'm less confident in using the technology for that. So if you could find a way to pop your question in the Q&A function, that would be great. So Ben, you've asked another question here. CGG states on their website that they'll be exiting marine seismic survey data in 2020 as part of their 2017 bankruptcy restructure. What has happened with these plans? So Ben, I work for a company called Clarite. We're an environmental consultancy company who are contracting to CGG. So I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to take that question on notice, and I will make a commitment to get back to you as to what those plans are, and whether or not the website needs to in fact be updated given CGG's current plans for the Regia seismic survey. I am aware that many seismic companies, CGG included, are transitioning along with a number of other energy companies, and the skills associated with looking for structures in the geology around the country are needed for things like carbon capture and storage, for offshore wind, for oil and gas still. So it may well be that the CGG's plans, along with many other companies like CGG, are changing. But I'm afraid I can't answer, as a contractor to them, I can't answer that question at the moment, but I will make a commitment to answer that question and get back to you, Ben. Now, I'm going to try this, Freya. I'm going to try and unmute you. Let's see if this works. Freya, you may now have permission to unmute yourself. So if you wanted to ask a question rather than type it in.
Thank you so much,
Hey,
Matt. I really appreciate you making the effort. Just wanted to let you know that I'm unable to access the Q&A. Maybe it's because I've jumped in on the browser, so there might be some other people in this meeting who have questions and just can't get them over the line.
then I think we've found a way. If you raise your hand, I should be able to unmute people now. So Freya, welcome. I'm glad we've managed to find a way of hearing you.
Thanks so much, Matt. And I'll keep it very brief. Looking at the docs that are still to be released, and I note the extension of time for consideration of those docs through public consultation. I'm just concerned that some of those documents look quite substantive, and I'm keen to know whether that is going to be sufficient time for us to adequately consider and raise any concerns that we might have about the contents of particularly the Oil Pollution Emergency Plan, Operational Scientific Monitoring Plan, Impact and Risk Assessment, Treatment Assessment.
Yeah.
If you could just respond to that, I really appreciate it. I'll unmute myself now. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks for the question, Fred. It's a good one. We're very much concerned that, typically our environment plans can run to thousands of pages of content, which is not digestible for people. So we've made some very deliberate measures to try and make it a bit easier for people to direct themselves to their own interests, and also for us to provide information in a more succinct way. So the chapters that I'll release this week, we have 9 chapters of our assessments, and they relate to each of the impacts and risks that were identified in our preliminary impact and risk assessment. And so each chapter is a bit more digestible on its own, and there may well be some chapters that you want to go into in more detail than others. In fact, some you may not be interested in at all, but it's obviously, that's not for us to necessarily decide. That's for you to kind of choose your own adventure, if you like, through the content. We are also aware, though, that some of the documents, particularly the oil spill one and the sound propagation chapter, are going to be huge documents, with lots of references and lots of scientific literature for people to go through. So we have also got intentions of, once these documents are published, we're going to do some work to try and prepare 1 to 2 page summaries of that content as well. So people might be able to, if you've only got a short amount of time, you'll be able to get that content in a more digestible form, either a 1 or 2 page, or if you've got the time available, then the more detailed assessments will be there. So in summary, Freya, we fully recognise that there's a lot of content we're going to be pushing out to folks. We hope that we've structured it in such a way that you can direct your interest towards those things that are more significant to you and how you may be affected. Okay. Right. I think. Okay, so don't see any more Q&A, but I am conscious that maybe for some people the Q&A function isn't working. So once again, if you wanted to raise your hand, that's something that you may be able to do, and I can find a way of unmuting you. The other thing, of course, the website. Oh, Freya, you have another question. Go ahead, Freya.
It's a supplementary, I guess, Matt. Thanks.
Yeah,
so
sure.
just if it turns out that these documents land and we are looking at sort of quite a mammoth job to go through that and give that due consideration, is there any opportunity for an extension of this consultation period, noting that you have such a long time frame before the closure of potential operations?
Yeah, that's right. So there's 2 things that will happen, Freya. One, obviously, if people respond to us, and I would advise that you do it with an objection or claim through the consultation process, and you say, I need more time. There's 2 ways that we could facilitate that more time. One would be to extend, just as we have done at the moment, for another month. So we could do that again. But obviously we have a schedule that we're trying to stick to. So the other way of doing it is basically that we have a subsequent sort of about a 6-month process when we make the submission to NOPSEMA, where we continue the consultation through the public comment period and through the NOPSEMA assessment process. So as much as our website has this pause now that we've said is on the 30th of July, that pause is simply for us to be able to compile the information at a point in time and make a submission. That doesn't mean the consultation stops. So if you needed more time, what we would say is, okay, well, look, you've now got the information you need. We recognise you need more time. Hopefully you can understand that we've also got a schedule we'd like to keep. And there's this kind of 6-month window with NOPSEMA where we can kind of push through with the consultation and give ourselves essentially another 6 months, which obviously by the time that all transpires, hopefully that's plenty of enough time to see all the content and to be able to do the engagement, because it's not just the time needed to consider the information. You need to raise objections and claims. We need to respond to those. We need to show how we're treating those objections and claims and trying to reduce impacts and risks further. So it's not just the time that you need. There's a process that needs to play out. And it might well be in the long run that both of those mechanisms are used. So there may be an additional extension, and there may be that we move the consultation into that during the submission process. But that will be case by case with each individual. Thanks for the supplementary. That was a useful question. All right. I'll happily stay online for a little bit longer, but we are up on the 30 minutes that we had allocated for the webinar. These webinars are occurring roughly every month. We're trying to make them monthly, but 5 or 6 weekly, something like that. And if there's something significant that we need to share, some significant change or some information is released, such as the NOPSEMA guideline, we will do them as and when we're required. We feel it's beneficial. So if people wanted to dial off now, that's fine. If people wanted to stay and ask more questions, more than happy to do that. And for those of you out in the region, maybe you'll be able to find the time to attend one of the sessions we've got coming up. Please do look at our website. So I'll be out in Warrnambool on Monday, Port Fairy on Tuesday, and Portland on Wednesday, 6 till 8 p.m. and the venues are all available on the website. So thank you so much for dialing in, your time and attention. And I look forward to hopefully meeting all of you soon. Hi there, everyone. We are now going to conclude the webinar. So thank you very much once again for your time and attention. There will be a recording of the webinar available in a little while on the website. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.